Hello and welcome to IP Study Video Lectures. Today we are going to discuss chapter number 3 of grade 8 social science. The chapter name is Life in Rural India. Now when East India Company started to expand their rule over India, then they employed different people for good administration. These were the revenue collectors, police and judicial officers. As these people who were working for the British government, they interfered with the way villages were run, then we see there is a conflict between the two. The way in which the villages were run was no longer possible, and these officers became important in the villages. And the village panchayats, which had traditionally dominated the functioning of the villages, their power, their value decreased. Also, another big change during this time period was the introduction of commercial crops. So, Britishers wanted more revenue from the land, and that is why they encouraged Indian farmers to grow more of cash crops rather than food crops. So, now let us discuss the land revenue policies under the British in detail. We will start from the year 1765. It was the year after Battle of Buxar. Here we saw that the allied forces of Bengal, Awadh and Mughals were defeated by the Britishers, and they were made to pay for the losses that were incurred by the Britishers. So one such agreement was that Shah Alam II granted the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha to the English East India Company, as well as an annual tribute of rupees 26 lakhs. We discussed that in our last chapter as well. This is important because now they were not only getting a part of the revenue, but the entire districts, the entire revenue collection would be done by them. So for this they also appointed 2 deputy Diwans for Bengal and Bihar, and they fixed the amount in cash which was to be collected as revenue. Now, why is this a crucial point? Now, if you understand the nature of farming as an economic activity, then we see that the income of farmers is not consistent. Especially we are talking about 200-250 years ago from now, when there were no proper ways of irrigation. Farmers were very much dependent on monsoon. If the monsoon was good, then it's fine, but if the monsoon was in excess, then it could lead to flooding, and if there was a bad monsoon, then it can lead to a drought-like situation where farmers are not going to have a good harvest. So farmers' income was not consistent, but the revenue that was supposed to be collected by them from the Britishers, it was a fixed amount. So it led to a lot of troubles for the farmers, who were forced to pay a fixed amount every year, even though on some years they were not having a good harvest. Also, to pay these taxes, farmers had to move to commercial crops. So various cash crops were grown. Commercial and cash crops simply means the crops which are supposed to be sold in the market and not for the purpose of self-consumption, as was the case before. So before Britishers came, farmers were mostly growing rice, wheat and other staple crops, which are the, you can say, food crops. But after this, they were forced to grow cash crops like cotton, poppy seeds, indigo and so on. So this made a switch to commercial agriculture, which was kind of forced by the British policies and not a voluntary decision of the farmers. And all this was because, as we understand, the primary motive of Britishers, like any other colonial power, was to collect revenue. It was not the development of farmers, it was not making right decisions for the land, for the environment. No, their main focus was on collecting more and more revenue. And for this, they needed to develop some policies that could justify their economic exploitation, because to the rest of the world they never claimed to be colonizers. They always said that they were in India for the betterment of the country, because they wanted to civilize the country. They never admitted on exploiting the natural resources of this country. Anyway, let's discuss about the three main land revenue systems. These are the permanent settlement, Ryotwari system and Mehelwari system. So let's first discuss about the permanent settlement system. This was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in the year 1793 in Bengal. Now, under this system, zamindars were made the owners of the land. Now, this is important to note, zamindars and not the farmers. Farmers who actually toiled in the fields from sunrise to sunset, they were not made the owners of the land, it were the zamindars. And they worked as the agents of East India Company by collecting the land revenue. So zamindars were made the owners of the land, and they were working as agents of the company to collect the land revenue. Now zamindars had to pay a fixed amount of the collected land revenue. So this amount was fixed for many years, and we will see how this is problematic. But let's take for example that one zamindar is given 100 hectares of land, right? So he would have to pay maybe rupees 1000. We are just assuming this number, rupees 1000 as revenue to the English East India Company. And this proportion of revenue was also fixed. 10/11 of the land revenue was given to the Britishers, and only 1/11, so less than 10%, was kept by the zamindar himself, right? But let's suppose this 10,000, 1000 is the amount which is 10/11 of the total revenue system. So this amount of rupees 1000 is fixed, right? Now, if the zamindar did not pay the fixed amount of revenue, the British could sell the ownership of the land in auction. So if one zamindar, suppose that amount of 1000 rupees is not paid by the zamindar, so this land would be sold off to another zamindar maybe, so that they could do a good job on it and collect the land revenue as the Britishers wanted them to do. And lastly, zamindars were given the hereditary right of the zamindari, which means generation after generation, same family was owning the land. Now, what is the consequence of this kind of system of permanent settlement or the zamindari system? First of all, it created a new class of landlords in the form of zamindars. So this kind of feudal system was persistent in Europe, but it was not so prevalent in India. But after this, we see there is a new class of hierarchy in India, where the zamindars are dominating the village because they are the owners of the land, and the farmers who work on the land are not the owners. They became the political allies of the British. So obviously zamindars favored the Britishers because they were getting the benefit out of it. They became the landowners and they were enjoying important political power in that particular village. It also provided financial security to the zamindar. So obviously this system works for the benefit of zamindars, not the farmers, because zamindars are getting the share of revenue that is collected as taxes. Many wastelands and forests became arable. Now this is an important point. Why did more land became arable or cultivable? Because Britishers had told the zamindars that we are giving you this much land and you can collect revenue from this land, and the amount of revenue was also fixed for rupees 1000. In our example, it was 1000. So if zamindars wanted to increase their their revenue, then they will try to get more land under cultivation. So maybe they will try to increase this land to 200 hectares. Now they have to still give 1000 rupees to the Britishers, but their revenue will increase, right? Their revenue will increase, because earlier if they were getting say 1100 from the village as revenue, and they were keeping 100 rupees for themselves and giving 1000 rupees to the Britishers, now on the extra 100 hectares they can keep the entire 1100 to themselves, because the amount which was supposed to be given to the Britishers was fixed. So more and more non-cultivable land, which was the forested area or which was a barren land, that was also made to be agricultural land, right? So permanent settlement was so heavy and oppressive assessment. Taxes were often collected by oppressive methods. So farmers who were supposed to pay the land revenue, they were forced to give this revenue no matter how good or bad their harvest was. And these zamindars even used some evil methods to collect the revenue from the farmers. The position of the actual cultivators of the land worsened, as they could be evicted by the zamindars for the non-payment of taxes. And if the farmers failed to pay these taxes, they were evicted from their land, and someone else was employed as maybe farm laborers to work on this land and grow crops for the zamindars. In the long run, we see that this settlement benefited the zamindars. We had discussed that from the example, that because only a fixed amount was supposed to be given to the Britishers, so they tried to increase the land under cultivation and increase their own revenue. And yes, peasants were the ultimate sufferers from the whole settlement scheme. Now, to overcome the challenges of the permanent settlement, Britishers came up with another policy. This was known as Ryotwari system. This was introduced in the year 1820 by Alexander Reed and Thomas Munro. Now they introduced this Ryotwari system, and under this system, the land revenue was collected directly from the ryots. So ryots are the farmers who are doing the cultivation on that land, and here there was no middleman, there was no zamindar. The land revenue was collected directly from the ryots. In this system, farmers were recognized as the legal owners of their land. So whatever land they were doing cultivation on, the farmers themselves became the owners of the land under this system. Now the problem with the Ryotwari system was mainly that the amount that was expected from the farmers was again very high. It was a fixed amount, and the farmers had the same trouble as was the case in permanent settlement system. Now this system was practiced in Mysore and Karnataka. That is where it was started, and later on in different parts of South India and also Bombay and Madras it was implemented. Now let's discuss the next revenue system, that is the Meherwari system, which came along during the same time, but this system was implemented more in the regions of Madhya Pradesh, Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. This system was introduced by Holt Mackenzie. Under this system, we see that the village headman was given the power to collect the revenue from the farmers and hand it over to the Britishers. So just like in the case of permanent settlement, it was the zamindars who were made the owners of the land and were responsible for collecting revenue. Here it was the job of the village headman who played that role of a middleman. But the difference under this system was that here the land was inspected. They did proper calculations on what amount should be collected from which land. So depending on how large the field was analyzing the crops that were grown on the region, they collected the amount of revenue. And as per this settlement, village headman was responsible to collect the revenue from the villagers and hand it over to the British. But again, the problem was this revenue was approximately half of the total produce. So can you imagine, if 100 kg of rice is grown from one field, the amount of revenue would be equivalent to 50 kg of rice grown. So very less amount is left with the farmer who is actually doing the hard work of growing the crop. Now that we have read about the 3 land settlement systems, let us discuss about their impact. Their impact was most felt by the farmers whose condition became more miserable. Here, the focus of the British and the focus of all these land revenue systems was collecting maximum revenue from the farmers. There was no focus on the improvement of the condition of agriculture in the country. So let us discuss about the various consequences. First is that the land had become a saleable commodity. A saleable commodity means something that can be bought and sold. Now this might seem a very simple idea in modern days, but if we look at traditional India, land was not a thing that was sold so easily. Land belonged to a common family and they preserved this land for years and years, and they did not sell it. But after the Britishers came, everything became commercial in nature, because to get the maximum output of any product, they forced the farmers to grow cash crops, and that is why when the farmers were not able to do so, they even considered selling their land which had belonged to their families for many centuries. So due to the high rate of revenue, many farmers were also forced to sell their land. This led to an increase in begars or bonded laborers. The zamindars and even the village headmen in the case of Meherwari system, they took no interest in improving the agricultural methods or yields. Even in modern times, we see that there is a lot of research that is going on to improve the status of agriculture. Better seeds, first fertilizers, pesticides are being introduced so that we can get good use of the land and improve the quality of the harvest. But during that time, there was no focus on such a thing. The entire focus was on the collection of revenue. Failure of rains brought about famines. So famine is a condition when there is shortage of food supply due to dry conditions. So because many farmers had left farming, or because many were growing commercial crops, there was shortage of food grains in the villages. Last point is very important, and it sums up the discussion so far. The self-sufficiency of the village was ruined. Self-sufficiency means a village which was able to provide for its own needs. So before the Britishers had come, the villagers were also doing agriculture and they were managing every resource very well by themselves. Right? There were no commercial crops, but whatever food they were growing, they were sustaining their own needs. But such a self-sufficient system of the village became dependent after the policies of the Britishers. There was a shift to the cultivation of commercial crops. So let us discuss this topic in detail. What exactly is commercialization of agriculture and why it had such a huge impact on the life in the villages of India. Now, under the British rule, cash crops were grown in India to provide raw materials for the European industries. Now, it is important to understand the political context behind this. During the time the Britishers came to India, there was industrial revolution that was going on back in Europe. They required raw materials. So these raw materials were grown in India and they were produced at a less cost, and that is why they could make the finished products in the factories in England and sell the products there and to the rest of the world at a higher cost and make profit. So that was the ultimate aim why Britishers even wanted to come to India and colonize this land. So various commercial crops were in demand. Indigo, which was a dyeing agent, it gave a very rich blue color which was in demand in the clothes. Especially the trend of blue jeans was becoming popular back in Europe. Mulberry leaves were also in demand because they were used for silkworm rearing. Then poppy seeds, quinine, opium, tea, coffee, sugarcane, all these commercial crops were in demand. And these crops were grown on large plantations. So a large plantation is one where a single crop is grown over a very large field. And obviously, because it is difficult to set up a large plantation because it involves a very large land, it was not easy for the Indian farmers to set up plantations, and that is why we see that most of these plantations were owned by the British or European powers. So large scale plantations were set up in Assam, North Bengal and Kerala, and the factories for these goods to be manufactured, these factories were set up mainly in Bengal and Bihar. The planters tempted the tribal and the landless laborers to work on these plantations and factories and use them as slaves. Why we are saying slaves? Because they were given a very less amount, and when they were not able to, you can say, agree to the terms that the Britishers gave to them, then they were even treated like slaves and they were working for them for a very long time. They also forced the peasants to grow commercial crops and sell the produce to the factors at very low price. So they exploited almost every section of the society, whatever way in which they could. Now let us study this case study on indigo plantation. Now indigo was a dye that was a natural dye which was in great demand during this time period. The term indigo comes from the Greek word indikon, meaning from India. It was the first crop to be grown on British plantation. And why was this in great demand? Because this dye was used to give a very good, very apparent blue color to the clothes, which was a trend in European market. The climate of England was not suitable to grow indigo, and that is why they relied on North America and the Caribbean countries where indigo was normally grown. But after America had become independent, it had become the United States of America and an independent country, so they had to rely on some other market where they could grow indigo. So they were forced to look at other places where indigo could be found, and they turned towards India. Here they forced the farmers in Bengal region to grow indigo, and since there was great demand for this dye, many of the British officers also set up the indigo plantation where they wanted to use the tribal laborers and other casual laborers from India to work on their fields. So now let us discuss how indigo cultivation was actually practiced in India. The first system under this was the Niji system, which simply means that the planters were growing indigo on their own land. Now, there was a huge problem with this system for the indigo planters. First of all, they were restricted to small areas of fertile land, because the rest of the land area which was fertile in nature was owned by the farmers, and they were growing the food crops there as per their needs. So there was less accessibility to the land which was grown for the purpose of indigo. Then the second problem was that it was difficult to secure the laborers plows and bullock carts and other you can say necessities for growing any crop. This was difficult because the peasants did not want to work for the planters as well. They were engaged in their own lands and growing their own crops. So they did not want to work on the land owned by the planters where indigo is grown. So this is why we see that the Niji system is kind of a failure, and Britishers are not able to get as much indigo as they wanted to be grown. And this is why they came up with the Rayoti system. Under this system, they made a deal with the farmers. So initially they give them an advance, a loan to the farmers, and for this they would have to dedicate 25% of their land for growing indigo, right? So they made a deal with the farmers, gave them money in advance to grow 25%, to dedicate 25% of the land for the growth of indigo. It might sound fair at start, and that is how it seemed for the farmers as well, but sooner they realized that this amount was very less for the price they were giving for the indigo after it was being harvested, right? So they were forced to pay this to sell this indigo that was produced to the Britishers, but they were actually incurring losses by this process and not gaining anything. And that is why we see that they were quickly caught in a death trap. Now, what were the various challenges for the farmers? Let us discuss that. Farmers who grew indigo did not get much money for it, making it hard to repay their loans. So as we discussed before, they gave them money in advance, but this money was not sufficient enough and they were actually incurring losses. Then after indigo was grown, they could not grow rice because the soil was exhausted. Now this is the nature of indigo crop, that once it is grown, it makes the land very infertile. It is not possible to grow other crops on this land for next 3 to 4 years, and this is why farmers hesitated to grow the indigo crop on their land. Now if the peasants refused to follow the orders, then the planters or the Britishers, they employed the lathias. So they employed the goons who would beat the peasants up, and they had no one to complain to, because the local police officers and the judges also supported the planters. They were also supporters of British, so there was no hearing for the plight of these indigo farmers. So we can say that the condition of farmers became more miserable, and this resulted in indigo rebellion, where the farmers had enough and they wanted to rebel against the Britishers. So what were the causes of the indigo rebellion? Let's quickly discuss that. The planters has exploited the peasants by paying them very little for the indigo that they produce. So we already discussed that. The amount given to the peasants for growing indigo was very less. The loans taken by the peasants to grow indigo led to a cycle of debt, which was difficult to escape. So it was like a cycle of debt that kept on increasing, and their income was declining. So next point is the planters used unfair practices. So we already discussed that. They used coercion and threats. They employed their goons to beat up the farmers if they failed to provide the revenue. And as the peasants became more aware of their rights and were inspired by the ideas of freedom and justice, which the nationalist movement had begun in the rest of the country, so they wanted to outburst in the form of a rebellion. So what happened in this 1959 rebellion? Thousands of people refused to grow indigo because indigo cultivation made the land barren. So this was their main demand, that they did not want to grow indigo on their land as it was making their land barren. So in 1860 we see that farmers across the Barsat division in the district of Nadia and Pabna, they revolted, and they were led by this revolt was led by Biswas brothers. Under this revolt, we see that there were constant protests, there were even violent clashes between the peasants and the planters. But unfortunately, we see that the British government was able to suppress this revolt with the help of the zamindars. Now, what happens after the 1859 revolt? We see that British government took some notice of the situation and wanted to intervene into it. They established the Indigo Commission, and this Indigo Commission was to investigate into the evils of the indigo cultivation. So, because there was some international pressure on the Britishers and the national movement had also started, we can say even the 1857 revolt had just happened a few years ago. So they were cautious about how they ruled over India, and they took some step, at least on paper, to show that they were empathetic about the situation and wanted to improve the situation. So there were some reforms in indigo cultivation system, and we see that it led to the decline of indigo industry in India. However, we also see that later on in Bihar, they did the same process again and forced the peasants in Bihar to cultivate indigo. And that is why later on we will discuss about how in Champaran in Bihar, Mahatma Gandhi went and did another revolt against the Britishers to save the plight of the Bihar farmers. So all in all, in this chapter we can see how the interest of Britishers when it comes to agriculture was only to collect land revenue, increase their land revenue at any cost, and they were not really concerned about the needs of the farmers. And this also led to decline in agriculture, which was one of the main activities of people in India even back then and even today. But the condition of farmers under the British rule is really pitiable, right? So I hope you understood this chapter, and we will meet again in our next video lecture.